Welcome back to part 3 of the Dungeon Master Guide.
I don't like that either. It was forced.
That was weird.
It was also off camera. That was poorly chosen.
Yeah, it's hard to find good help these days. Anyway, for this review, we're going to talk about environments, traps, and downtime activities. You may recall downtime activities we mentioned briefly in the player's handbook. There are expanded options here, which we'll get into. So let's talk environments. What do we got?
They have some very basic tables for basically what you gonna run into. So there's a dungeon, like if you want a dungeon, where do you want to put the dungeon? Rolling table for that. If you want something fancy to happen, there's exotic locations, so you can roll on that. And it's in a cloud. That's an option. You can have a dungeon in a cloud. Then, you know, who created the dungeon, who is in the dungeon, the alignment of the NPCs in the dungeon, the classes of the people in the dungeon, why the dungeon was built, the history of the dungeon. You got tons of stuff about a dungeon.
It is nice because a lot of the times, I mean, after the fact or even in like video games and stuff like that, I sit there and I go, why is this here?
Yeah.
Like, who puts a dungeon here and why? Yeah. And in a lot of situations, you may not know, and it's nice that, like, if you were to, say, be a player and you were curious and you were like, oh, we're going to go into this dungeon, maybe I want to research it. And then, like, if you're a DM and you haven't thought this up, you can at least go to the table to quick try to figure that out.
Also has, you know, kind of like things that I wouldn't have thought of, like air quality and how far the sounds travel in the dungeon. And
useful stuff.
Light and dark, like what is it well lit? How far does light travel? Stuff like that, which is kind of cool. And then goes on to different dungeon hazards. You want to talk about dungeon hazards?
I mean, you can.
I have the book. I should just.
You should just. I mean, again, just as a caveat for a lot of this stuff, a lot of information here. Probably more is better in this situation because your DM can choose to take or leave it as they like. You know, if you want to worry about the air quality in a dungeon, that's a thing that your DM could find stuff for to get ideas, or they could just be like, it's fine.
Dungeon, it's okay.
You're good. So yeah, you're there with hazards. You want to roll over?
There's just like a bunch of different kinds of molds, webs, slimes with all different kind of DCs and all different kinds of effects and how to detect a hazard and all that stuff. So really useful stuff to fleshing out your dungeon.
And again, I mean, take it or leave it.
Yeah, and if you don't have to. No. Then it goes on to different kinds of environments, wilderness, underwater, stuff like that. And really gives you as a DM how to run travel, which is something that the two options it gives is travel montage and hour by hour. So run it how you want to run it.
Yeah, I mean the hour by hour is where you could throw in if you have a random encounter table. Mm-hmm. You know, every hour, every 6 hours, whatever it is, you've traveled for 2 hours. Just give me a d20 roll. And again, another way for like players getting complacent. Maybe falling into that, think that they're too good for everything, and you're like, just give me a d20, and even if there is no random encounter, just to like snap everybody back into the game, like, oh shit. Oh, okay. And then you get the 16? Oh, alright, cool. And then they're like, wait, is that good?
Yeah.
Is that bad? I don't know what's going on. Then you're back in the game.
Yep. It's a good call.
Yeah.
And it also gives you different rules for different kinds of wildernesses. You know, whether it's cold, whether the water's cold, whether there's quicksand, razor vine, slippery ice, stuff like that. Just different, you know, stuff. Foraging table, stuff to flesh out your travel and environments.
Yeah.
Then you get into the random settlements, and I don't know if you can see, these are all different tables to build a settlement. There are tons of them. We're not going to go over them. And then random buildings in the settlement, like.
I think there's even one for like naming a tavern, isn't there?
Probably.
I feel like that's a thing. I feel like it's a table somewhere around somewhere.
Yes! Tavern name generate. You want to roll? 2 d20s. I took the dice away, didn't I?
I got it. 2 d20s, you said?
2 d20s.
I got 12.
12.
And a 3.
3. The Leaping Dwarf.
The Tavern of the Leaping Dwarf.
You know it.
There you go. Again, as crazy in-depth or as you want to get, or just not.
Yeah. And then one of the cool things is underwater stuff. Underwater encounters, how to navigate on the sea.
That's something I feel, unless you're kind of going into that campaign knowing it's going to be an underwater one, that it's a lot of stuff that's just not, most DMs may just overlook.
Yeah.
And, even if it's just like one part of one dungeon or one part of one thing where there is a potential underwater thing, it's kind of cool to throw it in there because, like, there's spells like water breathing you may never take. There's things you may never deal with, like, holy crap, I have a really strong dexterity but not a great constitution and I'm wearing heavy armor. I'm going to sink like a stone and I can't really hold my breath. Maybe we got to figure something out for this. Maybe I have to take my armor off for the first time ever in this game. Or things like that. Gives you an opportunity to have a different animal companion or something like that. Like, let me get a dolphin or whatever, just for the fun. I mean, or travel on the sea, also something different to kind of shake that up.
Different random encounters.
Yep.
Encounter merfolk and giant octopi. I don't know if that's a thing.
Krakens.
Kraken!
They're actually crazy because they have lair actions on this too. They're like legendary.
Is the sea their lair?
I'm not sure, but they have like crazy intelligence. Like they're not mindless anymore.
Oh,
they're
nice.
they're like super dangerous.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So next up is probably traps.
Traps. You want to talk about traps?
Yeah, sure.
Talk about traps.
I'll take that. Again, since we have discussed the fleshing out of dungeons, a big part in a dungeon is traps. They have here, which actually you just were kind of talking about, the difference between this and the pre-written campaign traps.
Yes. In the Horde of the Dragon Queen pre-written campaign, there were a bunch of traps that you just triggered if you did something. Like, if you didn't step where the footsteps were, you triggered it. If you touched the leather spiky curtains, you triggered the trap. And there was no way to not trigger the trap. And
I think one of them was just like roll a d6, or roll a d20. And, like, if you get an odd number or an even number, you trigger the trap.
Yeah, it was something
and it's
like
like, well, there's no, like, it's like a pressure plate. Like, I didn't get a chance to dodge that pressure plate or something. I don't know.
Well, one of them was poison hooks, like very tiny poison hooks on leather straps that were like a curtain. And if you touched them, you got damaged.
I mean, I that one I think I'm okay with more than anything because, like, you're not, like, I don't know how you would know to, like, make a dex save when you're touching certain. But, yeah, I think I remember some of them were, like, just, triggered.
Sometimes you get trapped from traps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's different types. Damage severity by level is pretty interesting. If you're a 11 to 16th level character and it's a dangerous trap, it could do 10d10 damage to you.
That's a lot.
And then they have ridiculous complexity of traps. Collapsing roof, falling net, fire-breathing statue, pit, poison dart, poison needle, rolling sphere, sphere of annihilation. And then several different versions beneath them. Is it magic? Is there a simple, just like leaves on top of a pit? Is it like magic, illusion, and things like that? So again, you can get as crazy with these traps as you want, or just, make them as basic as you want. That's it pretty much for traps. Again, it's up to you to figure out how much you want to add in. Next up is a thing for between adventures, which is it will lead into downtime activities. But what it has is really cool stuff of, like, let's say you just completed a campaign, which I feel like potentially isn't a big thing. It can be, don't get me wrong. At least in the games I've played, most of the games have petered out before the campaign could end. Mm-hmm. So there was never a continuing of character, or people got complacent and wanted to make a new character. It has a section here for linking adventures. So you completed campaign X, and that adventure is done. How do we get you from, whatever crazy position you're at from having completed that adventure to the next adventure? So it has a couple of examples of, like, maybe some of the NPCs that you encountered were gonna, ask you to go do this, or the quest that you thought was over was only part of it. Like, you get to the end of the epic dungeon, and then you find this thing, and it's a key. What does the key open? Well, now we're on to the next quest.
Yeah.
It talks about how to plant adventure seeds to get your party going. A captured NPC reveals the location of someone or something that might interest the characters, or the characters receive an anonymous letter that sheds light on a plot or impending event for which they were previously unaware. Foreshadowing how to track a campaign. which is actually pretty. There's actually, I'm going to look through, read a couple of these things. Campaign planner. Write down the main story arc for your campaign. Write down character notes and keep a running tally of the adventurers' classes and levels and downtime activities they're engaged in. If they have a ship or a stronghold, record where it's at. Keep a copy of all handouts you make for your players. Adventure log. NPC notes. Record statistics and interactions between your characters and the NPC. Keep a calendar, essentially, to see what season you're in as the campaign moves along. And then it says Toolbox. Keep notes wherever you create, significantly alter a monster, magic item, or trap. Keep any maps, random dungeons, or encounters you create. This way you have stuff to refer back to, which could be good for you because, one, it might remind your players of something that had happened, or something they completely forgot about. And you're like, oh hey, remember that seemingly useless NPC that you guys just glossed over that one time because you didn't think he was worth it or didn't have any money? Turns out he was like a god. And he's pissed at you for not helping him out that one time, and now he's sending people to destroy your family. Or whatever.
Yeah.
They have stuff for maintenance costs, for maintaining any buildings you have, and then it runs into downtime activities. Do you want to talk about these?
Yeah, sure. There are a bunch of different downtime activities that one can engage in. Crafting magic items, if your DM lets you. Carousing, building things, running businesses. You can get better at stuff, you can learn how to do stuff, you can sell a magic item. Lots of different options, but a lot of them take like a really long time.
Yeah, the way downtime can be run in this is if you play, let's say, like you play weekly. So your game ends at the end of a given week, and you're not like in a dungeon or someplace where like you designed your game to be succinct, sort of almost episodic. The episode ends, and then when you guys come back next week, it might not be immediately where you left off.
Yeah.
The DM could say, like, and in between now and next week, you have a week of downtime. The way this works is you can technically compile your downtime and then spend it all at once. It doesn't really make sense, but that's kind of how it goes. Like, you could compile weeks or months of downtime over a while and then be like, I'm going to use all my downtime, or say that I've been using it, and then I'm going to learn a proficiency in a skill, or I'm going to craft something, or I'm going to build a town, or the getting better one is something where, like, if someone is fallen behind in the party, or they haven't been around a lot and they need to catch up, the DM could have them spend downtime to do training to then hit a certain level to make them on par with the rest of the party. You can build renown for your faction. The crafting magic items is pretty cool because, as we've said, gold hits a cap and you don't need it anymore. So maybe you spend your gold trying to find somebody to then find the recipe, because that's the real thing. Is to craft a magic item, it takes time and money, don't get me wrong, and potential spellcasting ability. But you need the recipe or the kind of blueprint for the magic item to craft it. And maybe that's a quest your players go on. They really want this cloak or this sword or this axe, and there's a wizard in the town that knows the recipe that you need to make that. But in a twist, it's all in his brain. So if you kill him, you can't find it. So you have to do what he says, and then he'll impart to you that knowledge. And you go do the quest for him, he gives you that, and then it's going to take you 200 days to make this. But you have it now, and you know it. So you could potentially, every 200 days, continue to craft these. Which, I mean, I guess that's one way. So let's say you have an excess of magic items, or a pre-written campaign gives you a magic item that you don't want. There's rules for selling a magic item. So, the way it works is you have to make several rolls and take a certain amount of time, which in a situation where you have limited downtime could be a problem, to find a buyer in the first place.
Yeah.
Because magic items, the way they are in this campaign, or this edition rather, they are very rare to come along. So to find someone who could afford to buy one is not very likely. It's going to probably be your eccentric noble or your traveling, merchant. And then there's another table that'll tell you, the different modifiers for this. Like, you just sell it a normal item, or perhaps you sell the dragon egg that you found to a shady character for, almost 1.5 times the price, no questions asked. And you think that that's a great idea at the time, but it turns out that that's going to come back to bite you in the ass later. Or, you're like, I just want to get rid of this. You sell it at a loss to somebody for half of its value, but you get the gold and, you're rid of it and you're moving on.
Yeah.
There's also Sowing Rumors, which is something, I guess, if you play a more diplomacy, RP-based...
Like role-play...
Yeah, less combat. Sowing rumors about a town noble or a group of people it could be something that you want to do. It brings up the point that, like, even if you do try to convince the masses, there are still going to be some people who don't believe you just because, who are you selling them all this stuff they've known their whole life. So yeah, that's Downtime Activities. It's interesting stuff. I like the mechanic of adding downtime. I like the idea of having it on adventures.
Yeah.
Like you're traveling from point A to point B and it's going to take 6 months or 2 months. So there's, aside from days where you're you're actually actively adventuring or fighting stuff, maybe you use the downtime for, like, I'm going to practice using thieves' tools. So when I get a chance, every chance I get, I want to do that. Or I want to use my herbalism kit to make healing potions, and every 10 days I'll make a new healing potion as we travel along. Just things that you can do to fill that time, which I guess in previous editions you could do, but there was no real mechanic for it.
One of the things that I find kind of weird as we've been talking about this is the carousing table. Kind of seems out of place.
Yeah.
Most of the tables in here and most of the downtime activities are, like we've been talking about, things that you do over a long time that get you really cool stuff. There is also, in the midst of this, the carousing table, which is just a night of drinking and gambling. And that's something that doesn't take many days and doesn't get you great stuff, but it can help flesh out an adventure. Get a little bit of gold, maybe get a girlfriend, maybe get locked up in jail.
Does it? I don't think there's any modifiers for carousing.
For multiple times?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see, like, if carousing character spends money as though maintaining a wealthy lifestyle. At the end of the period spent carousing, the player rolls percentile at the character level, then compares the total to the carousing table to determine what happens. So yeah, essentially, you could spend 1 day carousing versus 3 months carousing, and as per the game mechanic, there's no difference.
Yeah.
So, I guess you could look at it as, maybe I'm gonna go crazy this one night and I want to use the carousing table, or like I'm gonna carouse over the period of 3 months. So it's not every night, but every so often I'm gonna go in the bar and have a drink and do a little gambling or whatever. And then, at the end of the 3 months, I roll on this table, and then I get this much gold over that time. But the problem is, it says every day you do it, you spend money as if it's a wealthy lifestyle.
Yep.
Which I think is like 2 gold a day,
or
something like that, 5 gold a day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're doing that every day over the course of 3 months, you could be bankrupt by the end of that at earlier levels, and maybe only make what you made back.
Yeah.
Or potentially
lose money.
money.
So
really, it makes more sense if you're gonna carouse to do it on like a 1 day thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna carouse tonight, and then I spend 5 gold, and maybe I'm up money, or I'm down 10, but it's not like hundreds.
Oh, you can get inspiration. I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, if you're a particularly pious character, you can do some sort of thing that is relevant to your deity to then gain, I think, 2d6 inspiration, something like that.
No, you should take 10 days and you get inspiration.
I thought it
For 2d6 days.
Yeah, for 2d6 days you gain inspiration. So, that is good to do, but it's situational.
Yeah.
Because you need to have the time to do it, and then gain 2d6 days of inspiration, which is nice to have, but it can't, if you're doing this over the period of like a 3-month travel, you get 2d6 of inspiration for every 10 days, your time where you have inspiration might lapse and you don't get it.
Yeah.
So it's like, you really need to be like, okay, 10 days ends, I'm going on an adventure, and each day is going to matter.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any days where I just blow through that whole day.
There's not going to be a week of travel till we get to the adventuring location.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess you could always just be like, every 10 days I just want to do this when we're not doing anything.
No.
And then assuming your character is pious enough to want to do, or have an opportunity to do that. Because if there's no people to preach to, or no whatever their given deity's thing is to try to do, there's no way to gain inspiration.
No.
But it's a cool mechanic.
Yeah, I like it.
hopefully in supplemental materials and other things we'll get more downtime activities.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
So next up, we're going to talk about treasure because there's a lot of stuff here with magic items.
Treasure! That wasn't finger guns. That was excited pointing.